Welcome to the Assembling Inclusion podcast. On this show, we feature different programs, individuals, and initiatives focused on being more inclusive of individual needs. We invite you to learn right alongside us. If you want some additional resources or access to our courses, please visit our website or follow us on social media. But for right now, let's get right to the episode. Esports are quickly becoming a popular topic of conversation within education. More and more school districts are adopting these team-based video game competitions for their students. Participating in esports has a variety of benefits, including building friendships, creating positive peer-to-peer experiences, developing a sense of teamwork, increasing leadership skills, building a community of belonging, and making schools more inclusive, which is what we'll be talking about today. I got the chance to interview Kelley from PlayVS and Brian Quinn from Special Olympics. These two organizations have developed an incredible program and partnership, creating unified Special Olympics esports teams. In this episode, we'll talk about how the program works, how these inclusive teams are built, and how the program benefits everyone involved. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you today, so let's get started. Welcome back to the Assembly Inclusion podcast. Today, we're joined by Kelley and Brian Quinn. Aaron is the community lead at PlayVS, and Brian is the director of programming and partnership at Special Olympics International, but focusing in North America. So Brian and Aaron, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get into the logistics of the partnership between your two organizations, I just wanted to have our listeners learn a little bit more about each of you. So could you tell our audience a little bit about yourselves, your background, how you got into your role?
Absolutely. I lead the community team here at PlayVS. PlayVS is kind of the leader in amateur scholastic esports competition. We primarily focus right now on high school. Definitely still very much in that startup phase. The company was founded a little over almost 5 years ago now. I've been with the company almost 2 years of that time. A lot of my role is really working directly with our community. So for us, it's our players and coaches. I've always kind of had a career in community, working directly with users, working directly with people. Kind of really have a passion with working with people, like activating our user base. Previously, I was with Airbnb, did a lot of the same work there, making sure that our users, our community feel like they're being heard. Do they feel like they're stakeholders in the conversation as well, too, in the business? Amongst that as well, too, do a lot of like content and player profiles and stories and things like that, and really highlighting our community as well, too.
Hey, everyone. Brian Quinn here with Special Olympics. I started with Special Olympics Arizona 15 years ago, doing some of our traditional sports and competition management. And I've been with our North America office 10 years and really focus on unified champion schools in the US, which is our initiative to break down the barriers between students with and without intellectual disabilities on campuses, pre-K through college, through unified sports, inclusive leadership, and whole school engagement.
Thank you both for just sharing a little bit about yourself and about your organizations as well. So can I ask, what was the inspiration behind starting the partnership between PlayVS and Special Olympics? I was part of Special Olympics. I was a coach for the track and field team for the middle school for 1 year when I was a teacher. And I have heard obviously about the huge rise in esports, which is very exciting. So what brought your two organizations together?
Well, that's great that you were a coach. Thanks for being part of our movement. And esports has always, I think, been out there and something that we had interest in at Special Olympics. And really, it was COVID. Our athletes are now on the sidelines. They're at home. They're isolated. And that was our impetus to really jump into that world. I think everyone knows that esports is a beast of a thing out there, and all young people are engaged in it in one way or another, whether they're playing or watching it or doing things on their phones. But there's a lot of mystery around it too. So I think that kept us out of it until we really needed it. And we got the demand from our schools and students. We looked into the market and seeing who were the leaders, and one of our mutual partners is the NFHS, National Federation of State High School Associations, and the NFHS Network, who already had a partnership with PlayVS So they were the clear leader when it came to high school, interscholastic style esports. So we just wanted to see if PlayVS would be open to guiding us and supporting us. And luckily from day one, they opened their doors, and really the rest has been history with how successful and great the relationship's been.
So speaking of COVID, like you said, that you kind of started during, which makes sense. Everybody was virtual. I saw that you ran your pilot test for the program in the 2020-2021 school year, which, I mean, a lot of schools were still virtual. I know I was still working virtual at that point in time. But what lessons did you learn from that initial pilot?
I think first that there's an interest there and there's a passion there. Schools wanted it, students wanted it, and quite frankly, students needed it to stay connected with each other and participate and stay connected with their school. I personally also learned that the esports world has a very giving and supportive side of it. And there's so many inclusionary benefits to esports as well that I didn't think about. So those were really positive things. I think more on the learning challenges side was just the extensive learning curve that comes with esports, especially those that don't have as much experience or are an educator that's trying to bootstrap it. Just a lot of education. And that's really where PlayVS, their expertise came into the fold with their incredible education systems and videos and tutorials. I think really investing in coaches in their education and also empowering young people to take the lead, to tell us and share with us and bring their expertise to the table to lead a lot of this work. There's other technical things and equipment, but I think really it's the human element that we realize we got to focus on.
I would just add as well, a lot of the programs that started in the pilot had some form of esports, or they had sometimes their students participating just in a club version or after school, and then setting the expectation too as well of like, oh, this is a real competition. You have 8 weeks. There's actually, time commitments and week commitments and things like that showing up week to week, that you actually have an opponent scheduled and things like that as well. It was definitely a learning moment.
I could have seen my students being super into this. That was a couple of years ago. They were writing opinion-based pieces about why esports should be in their school, and they were super into that type of environment. So I could see them wanting that type of program. I would have had no idea where to start, but that's great that there's so many resources available for the coaches. I'm sure a lot of coaches are probably in the same predicament of like, that's wonderful because the students are going to be so into this, but what do I do? How many teams are there currently playing in the Unified Esports program?
We can't comment on exact numbers, but we can say that there are 27 states currently competing with us across the country. The number has significantly grown since our pilot season, and it's really great to see more and more new states come on board. Usually every season, I would say at least 5 or 6 new states are deciding to opt into esports and offer it as part of their unified lineup.
That's great. And what are the requirements for being able to play or participate?
So first and foremost, our leagues are open to any school that is part of the Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools initiative or that want to be a part of it. So we want every school that's participating to gain the benefits of being connected to the Special Olympics movement, and also to our state Special Olympics offices. For those of your listeners that aren't aware, every state does have a Special Olympics office with support staff in place. And so we want them connected to gain the benefits of those supports as well. And other than that, it's really any of our states, of those 27 states that are already opted into participating, any high school is eligible to participate.
And then from our end, our unified league, we offer it completely free to schools. So there's no additional cost. There's no cost involved with participating in our leagues, as long as they're in high school age and at least 13 years or older. And usually the coach goes in, creates an account, gets verified on our platform. They then add in their players. And from that point, can officially enroll into the season, can compete in either our fall season or spring season, or we have a lot of schools that will do both as well.
So, and this might be me not knowing esports competition as well as maybe some of my listeners do, but I'm assuming there has to be specific games, right? Because you're doing competitions, so you have to be playing the same game. Is there a specific selection process for the games they're playing? Do the players decide? How does that work?
So we actually started with Rocket League. And folks who may not know anything about Rocket League is essentially, the best way to describe it is 3-on-3 car soccer. Essentially, the players man cars and they kick a big soccer ball around in a big field. And essentially, it's a 3-on-3 competition. And so we started with that title because one, it was a title already in our lineup at PlayVS. So we have partnerships with the actual publisher. So we actually partner directly with the publishers of game titles, offer them on our platform. It seems like a really good fit. And there's a lot of criteria that we go into. We've actually just for this season just started piloting Mario Kart 8 as well too as a second title for Unified. There's many things that we look into. First is obviously we want to kind of roll titles out slowly. We don't want to offer, 6 or 7 titles all at once and have low participation. We rather build season over season with one title, get to a good point, and then then add a second, add a third. The first was definitely around, I would say, around equipment and game cost and just accessibility for folks on campuses. So like Rocket League in particular, it's a free to play title. There's no cost. You can download it for free on PCs or game consoles. And since most schools typically have computer labs or some access to PCs already, it was a good fit for us because you don't have to buy additional equipment. There's not additional things you have to get. It's also what's called cross-platform as well. A PC player can play alongside someone who's also on an Xbox or also on a Nintendo Switch as well, all on the same team. They can kind of communicate with one another, compete together. So it makes it really easier. If one person's on a PC, one person's on a Switch, you can kind of mix and match what you offer. And then the Mario Kart was another really big inclusion for us. And through that, because we have a partnership with Nintendo, we were able to offer free copies of the game, free copies of online memberships. So there was no additional cost for schools there. And we were able to give away a bunch of free Switch bundles as well to controllers, to new programs as well to kind of get started. Some other factors we definitely look at too is we definitely want to look at titles that have a really strong team mentality. Some of our titles, it's a team scoring, but it one person plays and the next person plays and then the third person plays. Whereas like with Rocket League and Mario Kart, everyone's playing right next to each other at the exact same time. It actually has that true team mentality to it. So that was really, really important for us. And both those titles allow a good balance between Special Olympics athletes and unified partners too. Also, a big factor as well is just easy to pick up and play for the first time. Like we don't want to have a big barrier for students. Like they don't have to have prior experience with Rocket League or Mario Kart. There are titles that they can pick up for the first time in the season. And as the season advances, get better and better at the game and get more competitive as well. So there's not really a barrier there. You have to have been playing this for a few years prior. And then lastly, of course, pretty obviously, just popularity. These are titles that students want to play right now. They're the hottest in the high school scene. And so making sure we're going where the students are in terms of the games they want to play.
I appreciate the fact that you were focusing on going across the different devices, because I'm just thinking about from the accessibility standpoint, you can play on whatever device you feel most comfortable with. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I saw something on the website that said if you were playing on a team, there has to be a certain ratio, right, of the unified partners to the Special Olympics athlete playing at a given time.
That's right. We really follow our overall unified sports fundamentals, esports as well. So we always require either an equal number of Special Olympics athletes to partners, or if there's an odd number of participants, like in Rocket League, we have 2 Special Olympics athletes and 1 unified partner as the roster requirement.
Well, that's great. So everybody's really getting to play together and they're getting that team approach.
Other than that, our unified sports philosophy is about equity and everyone coming together on a similar playing field. We don't have athletes being mentored or served, but really partners are there to be an equitable teammate. And the neat thing about esports is a bit of anonymity behind it. And the fact that really, I think the labels are dropped and students are just there being students and having fun and creating those bonds that we all want to see.
That's great. Video games were the unifier, I felt like, for a lot of my students, because that was their relationship to their classmates. That was something they could all talk about. They all liked video games. So I think that's great that they're all able to collaborate on that team then and have that sense of camaraderie together. What does a typical practice session then look like? Are they all playing in different locations? Are they all together playing in a computer lab?
For that, I definitely have to say it does vary by school, even in terms of how many practices they have a week or how much time, because we really leave it up to the coach, kind of like any other sport of how many practices they determine they feel like they need or the team needs to get better. But they may have dedicated time during the day to compete together, but I know a lot of programs will also, for flexibility, compete remotely, at least for practices. I think the big difference between regular video game playing and esports is video games is very casual. You just kind of go on and have fun. You're not really trying to maybe get better. You're just kind of goofing off, having fun with your friends. Whereas a practice, if a coach is really involved, they're going to really focus on strategy. If I use Rocket League as an example, if they know their team is really good at scoring goals, but really bad at defending the goal, they'll spend a whole practice just having their players practice how to defend the goal, how to defend shots and things like that. You determine what your weak points are. Another great thing too is now that some of these schools have been with us for a few seasons, they may start playing some schools that they played before. So they start remembering like, oh, this person was really good, or this, we have to really watch out for this one particular player. So they're scouting as well. They're figuring out strategy for that next opponent. I would also say too, I think we want really well-rounded students and really well-rounded players as well too, and really try to mirror traditional sports as much as possible. So like a lot of schools will hold practices that don't even involve the computer lab or getting out of the computer lab and doing things besides gaming. I know some do mental, internet health, safety. They go through like different things they should know about, like dealing with toxic behavior, things like that. I know we also really highly encourage all, like particularly unified programs, to have some form of fitness incorporated into their practices as well too, making sure that students are remaining healthy. This can be as simple as some 5 minutes of stretching or walk around the campus, just something to kind of get up and be conscious of that, which is, again, like another great distinction between esports and video games, that structure there, that you have that adult in the room to say like, okay, that's enough for today. Let's just put this down. Let's go do something else.
So you've talked about the benefits of participating in this program, but of what you've seen so far, what do you think has been the most beneficial for the people who have participated in unified esports?
I would definitely say that for many of these students, this is the first time for them that they're experiencing what it's like to compete on a team, both being able to experience what it's like to win and lose together. We definitely have seen across the board that a lot of times, again, this is the first time that they've ever participated maybe on a team. Either if they were gaming before, there was a very isolated, or they were doing it much in solitude, versus now they're competing directly with their classmates. Again, they're learning to win and lose together as well. So we've seen across the board, just in socialization, as players get more comfortable, they sometimes take on leadership roles or help the coaches out, particularly if it's a coach maybe who's not too versed around esports, and communication skills as well. I can't tell you how many countless stories of coaches have mentioned to me of players opening up, saying this is the most introverted person I've ever seen. Now they're cheering on their classmates, and when they're competing, they're helping out, they're helping to set game strategy, they're actually walking others through practices. So it's been really, really remarkable to see, just finding a community for folks who maybe didn't have a place or didn't find a community on their campuses before.
To build on that, I think it's flipping the script on abilities as well, hidden abilities that were there. And you have students maybe without disabilities to come into an opportunity like this and have a certain mindset of who they're going to be, what they're going to be doing or supporting. And then they come in and, man, this guy is way better at this than me, and I have a lot to learn from them. And that's the fun thing. I will also mention too, that we've had some stories about students coming back to school out of the pandemic, or they had switched schools, and this was their only social outlet, and they had a lot of anxiety coming back into a physical school building. But when they were able to see their teammates in person, it just made a huge difference in making them feel connected to their school.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm just thinking about, obviously, people who play like a soccer team or the basketball team, like you have that team, you have them in the hallway with you, you see them. So it's great that this does the same thing for them in an area where maybe they feel more comfortable. Maybe video games are their thing and they're really good at that. And so they have their opportunity to shine and have their teammates in the hallway.
Through our seasons, we do playoffs, there's championships, there's a possibility of winning a unified trophy at the end of the season. They can check their standings. We have like public standing pages. They can see where they are through the season. It really brings out that competitive side too.
Do they compete by region? I'm assuming it's similar to other sports where it's like, are you like regionalized? Like these are teams in your area, or is it not? Because I mean, you could realistically, I guess, play with anybody in the country, yeah. I assume.
It's a kind of yes and no. So we do have regional leagues, but it's more of a time-based thing. So we kind of leave it open to school. Say for Rocket League, we do have an East and West league, but you may have a school on the East Coast that just the West time works better for them. And so we kind of leave that option open to them. Typically, they match where they are. So if they are an East Coast team, they're going to play in the East Coast League, but we give them that option. So there are technically regional leagues, but it's not geographically locking someone, say, from like a main school from competing in like the West League.
That makes sense. That's a lot more flexibility, I would think. Like if teams can only play at night, then that's great. If they're on the East Coast, they could play a West Coast team and somebody's available to play with them. So that's really great.
Yeah, we kind of learned that through the process. Honestly, through the pilot season too, like we realized like we had to be flexible with them and their time. And for a lot of them too, it's like they have that one dedicated time a week to do this. And so we want to be as flexible as possible in the offerings that we give them.
It's great how flexible that actually is. What do you think have been the benefits of esports versus like a traditional unified sports team? I mean, we've talked about the flexibility, so I'm sure that's a big part of it. And the anonymity of being able to be like, you're behind a screen, you don't know who you're playing against necessarily. But is there any other benefits that you see to participating in esports versus like a traditional unified sport?
I think the main thing that comes to mind is that not everyone likes playing physical sports or even can play certain sports. So this is typically open to just about anyone and breaks that down. And so it's something they want to do. This is where young people are. And so it's just something that they can have that pride in and creates that super inclusive environment. But we do hope that it's a gateway as well into unified sports, into other inclusive activities that they can take with them into the future. And Special Olympics is for all ages. And we want young people to just develop these inclusive mindsets and getting exposure to people of varying abilities and backgrounds. And we're all going to be better. Our society is going to be better for that.
I love that. I think that's really why I was drawn to the program. I could really see how this really helps with inclusion mindsets, especially in schools, because there's so many schools that just are not super inclusive, even if they're trying to be. So if at the very least, something like this could bring all different types of students together, and that'll start to build that inclusive community. If a school wanted to get involved and wanted to become part of the unified esports community, how would they go about doing that?
I think a great place to start is on the PlayVS website. playversus.com/SO-unified has details about the league that we're talking about and some of the specifics. I'll also just, again, shout out to our state Special Olympics offices as being the top resource for your school. And they'll be happy to hear from you. We have dedicated staff there that can provide guidance, support, potentially seed funding for things. So I would say those would be the top two recommendations.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to link the website, and then I'll put the reminder about the offices in the show notes too. I'm kind of like bummed that I'm not in the classroom anymore, because I would have loved to do something like this with my students. It would have been so great. They really would have loved it. They would have had to teach me about video games though, because Mario Kart I could have done, but I'd have to learn the other ones. They'd have to teach me, which I'm sure they would have loved, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought I was good at Mario Kart. Then I see some of these students competing, and I'm like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, that's how I would be. They would blow me out of the water. What plans do you have for expansion in future years for this partnership? So you had the pilot in 2021. This year you're still going strong. Are there any plans for any kind of expansion or anything?
We're in right now a 3-year term with Special Olympics. Our biggest goal right now, our biggest motivator is just adding more and more schools and getting more state adoption too. We mentioned that we have about 27 states currently opting into esports, and within those states, the amount of schools that are participating is growing and growing every season. We just want to kind of see that number just come up every season after season, and just seeing more and more adoption, get our numbers up, and just hopefully expose more students to the world of esports. With that, we're just looking mostly at creating more leagues. So for the spring, we're sticking with Rocket League and Mario Kart, but we're looking to add more time options and more league options for schools. Mario Kart was kind of a pilot for us here in the fall, and so we're like leaning into having 2 leagues and more availability for that in the spring. And then we usually do this on an academic year basis. That's when we usually talk about like adding different titles and other expansion or other things that we're looking to maybe implement. But to us, it's just like getting that adoption. I think we're very much in the early stages, kind of being not even a year through our official leagues yet, and just making sure that we're just exposing more and getting more schools involved.
And we're excited to be a part of it. Only other thing I'll add is that if you're a listener and you're not in a high school, that Special Olympics is for all ages, and we have a growing movement of esports opportunities outside of high schools as well. So again, connecting with your state office to figure out what those opportunities might be, or starting small as well as another recommendation. If you're not ready to commit to a full-on league, it's okay to get students together to do more recreational stuff to start out with.
So my last question for you both is just as a whole, how do you think the partnership between PlayVS and Special Olympics is making both gaming and schools in general more inclusive? I know we touched on it a little bit, but just wanted to get your final thoughts on that.
I would say, from the PlayVS perspective, like our biggest mission as a company is making gaming accessible for everyone. We really want to be the home of amateur esports. It's not just for the professionals. Like everyone should have this idea of a competitive gaming. And so for us, this partnership with the Special Olympics is just furthering that mission of making gaming even more accessible, giving it to a new community of students to be able to also participate and reap the same benefits and rewards. So obviously, like we mentioned, we're hitting students who may, like almost half of our students say they've never participated in extracurricular activities before joining the esports team. And so we're giving them a place to compete, to find a community, to even find a school family as well. And again, reap a lot of the same benefits that you do get in other sports. And for those who are maybe in the gaming world or have gaming experience, we're now setting structure for them. We're giving them a school outlet to make friends while doing something that they love to do as well, finding that community and harnessing something that they love, but in a very constructive way.
We know that schools have this growing influx of esports teams and clubs, and unified esports is quite new, as we've talked about. We don't want it to be a separate thing. And what we've seen is just reaping the great rewards of bringing unified students and coaches into the mainstream within a school so that the whole esports program gets exposure and is unified. So, and that way too, that if you're Katie and a teacher and you don't have a deep background in esports, that you can bring your students and they can benefit from the coaching talents and the passion that are already there in schools versus trying to come up with something completely new. So just really expanding the inclusive opportunities that are a lot of times already there or primed to be there.
Just echoing that too, some of our best schools now that are participating with us and have literally won championships with us came from a place where their coach literally had no idea what esports was, had no background in video gaming at all, and now they're winning unified titles in it. So you really don't need to have experience. You can really lean on your students for a lot of that.
It's giving them a lot of empowerment then too. Yeah, there's an adult there with them, but they're kind of taking control of the club and working together, which is great. I can really see how this program would be something that would really help to make school communities more inclusive, just everybody working together toward that common goal. And with the huge rise in esports, I can only imagine that this partnership will only continue to grow in the years to come. So I just want to thank you so much, Aaron and Brian, for being here with us today and for telling us all about the partnership between PlayVS and Special Olympics. Everybody needs to check out the show notes to make sure they get all the resources that I'm going to share. But thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Assembling Inclusion podcast. I hope the information in this episode taught you something new, gave you a new idea, or showcased a new perspective. If you liked the episode, feel free to leave us a review or comment. If you have a recommendation for an individual or an organization who would make a great guest, you can message us on Twitter or Instagram or send us an email at assemblinginclusion@gmail.com. See you next time.